A complete timing belt kit, including a timing belt tensioner, water pump, the thermostat, and the camshaft and crankshaft seals on this 2000 Audi A6 with the 2.7 liter bi-turbo engine. Now, in order to replace the timing belt on this car, you need to put the front of this car into the service position. Now, if you're just stumbling upon this video and you're not a viewer or a subscriber of my channel, then I suggest you simply watch the previous video that I put up before this video. In that video, I go in detail how you can put the car into the service position. Also, as you can see, I've removed some other components, including the air intake pipes from our intercoolers to our throttle body. You have one on each side. I've also removed the cooling fan and the fan clutch that goes right here. Obviously our serpentine belt and our serpentine belt tensioner that usually sits right in here. And the upper timing belt covers. All right, next we're going to remove this bracket and this pulley that's for our fan clutch assembly. And this is going to be somewhat tricky to remove. There's 4 bolts total, 2 of which you're going to have to access through this pulley. So I got, well, this one here is going to be a 5mm. And this one you can only loosen, you cannot completely remove it. And then there's 2 bolts on the bottom, and in order to remove the bottom ones, you're going to need a 6mm hex bit socket. The ones on the bottom you can remove. Here's the second one. And for this last one that you again need to get through this pulley, you're going to need a long 6mm hex bit socket. Again, you can only loosen this one, you cannot remove it with the pulley still on this bracket. All right, here we go. All right, so here's a closer look. This is the upper one, 5mm, 6mm, and 2 6mm go here. All right, next we'll need to put our engine at top dead center. So we get our 24mm 12-point socket on our crankshaft bolt, and we're going to turn this clockwise until our timing mark that's here on this harmonic balancer lines up with this arrow on this back cover. But more importantly, the bigger holes on these camshafts, which are these guys here, start to face each other, because you could have the timing mark on your crankshaft line up, but if the smaller holes, which are these guys, are towards the inside facing each other, you're not at top dead center. It has to be these bigger holes that are facing each other. All right, so here's a look at the mark at our crankshaft that's now lined up, and as you can see, these bigger holes are now facing each other. So now we're 100% at top dead center. All right, next, since I'm planning on replacing the crankshaft seal, we need to lock this crankshaft in place. Now there's a special tool for that, which is basically this guy right here. There's also a special tool for locking the camshafts, which I'll show you later. But this basically screws in to the side of your engine on the driver's side. There's going to be a little plastic cover that we're going to remove. Then when we screw this in, your crankshaft is locked in place. Then we can twist off this little crankshaft bolt, which is under a lot of torque. All right, so I finally was able to get it out. I won't lie, this is going to be a pain in the ass. When you take this cap out, make sure you also remove the O-ring. I just spent 10-15 minutes figuring out why I couldn't put in that special tool. Now, as far as where that goes, well, you basically come down on the driver's side, go inside here, and then from here, you go right up here, right from underneath your CV axle, and right through there. And I think you guys can barely make out where a special tool screws into the side of our engine block. And this is going to be a pain in the butt. You either need to use long ratcheting wrenches like I did, or get someone with tiny Donald Trump hands to help you out. However, it will be easier if you're doing this on a 2.8 liter. But regardless, now when we try to turn our crankshaft, we can't because it's locked in place. Next, we're going to remove our harmonic balancer. And as you can see, this one's held in by about 8 bolts. And again, you're going to need a 6mm hex bit socket for these. Now this should come off. Here's a closer look, and there are 2 notches on these that you need to pay attention to when it's time to reinstalling them. And next, our lower timing belt cover, which is held in by 2 10mm bolts. Oh yeah, before I forget, I did decide to replace the water pump, so it's a good idea to drain the coolant, and we're going to drain it by disconnecting the lower radiator hose. And the way you do this is to basically, you guys see this clamp right here? Just get a screwdriver at that end, push it back until this end on both sides is resting back here. So basically looking like this. And next, with your catch pans underneath, you just twist this and pull it off. Easier said than done. You know what, I'm actually going to completely remove the clamp. There we go. Take care not to lose or break these, because you're going to have a hard time locating another one. All right, now we get to put on our special tool for our camshafts. This thing has these two pins, one smaller, one larger, that go on the camshaft sprockets. And this is going to go on the camshaft sprockets like this, and it's going to hold them in place for you to replace your timing belts. And both this and the pin for the crankshaft were $24 delivered to my house. And I'll put a link to these or any of the tools you see in this video down below in the description box, so you can click on them and check them out yourself. This should go in a bit smoother than this, but you know, paying $24 for special tools, you can't expect much more. It'll get the job done though. And here's what it looks like after you install it. You want to make sure you install it completely so the camshafts can't move at all. So next we're going to remove our timing belt, and I'm going to do this by cutting it, since we're obviously not going to be reusing this. There we go. And next we'll remove our timing belt roller, which is this guy right here, and our timing belt tensioning roller, and then our timing belt tensioner, which is this guy down here. So our timing belt roller is held in by a 17mm bolt. So here's a closer look, and this is even more interesting. As you can see, this underneath this bolt, there's supposed to be a washer, yet there isn't. So what this means is that someone opened this up, for whatever reason, they took this off, and then they reused this roller, and yet they didn't put back a washer. So yeah, pretty glad we're doing a timing belt job on this. And you'll need a 6mm hex bit socket for the tensioning roller. And here's a closer look at this one, and this one has two washers, one on each end. And here comes our tensioner. And here's a close look at our tensioner. All right, next with our camshaft tool in place, we're gonna loosen our camshaft bolts. We're not going to completely remove them, we're just going to loosen them and back them out about let's say ½ inch on both sides. Next we'll grab our puller, we're going to put it around our camshaft sprocket like this, and then we're going to twist this and loosen our camshaft sprocket from our camshaft. So this way, with our camshaft tool in place, we're not turning our camshaft as we're twisting this puller. And this is going to pop, or at least it should. There we go. So we're going to remove our puller. We're going to just gently reinstall this camshaft and run this back down so this doesn't come loose off our camshaft. But right now this is pretty loose. When we do this, we don't have to redo with the puller to take it off. We're just redoing this so we can put our timing tool back on here for the driver's side. Alright, so unfortunately I didn't get this side on camera, and something funny happened. I had the puller on here, I just hand tightened it, then I sprayed some PB blaster around the bolts, and it just popped loose. I didn't even have to twist that puller much. So yeah, no elbow grease necessary for this end, just some PB blaster. Alright, so now you guys can see, now the camshaft where this bolt goes into stays in place, but these sprockets can turn or freewheel. This will help greatly in reinstalling our timing belt. All right, now we'll remove our camshaft tool and our camshaft sprockets. There we go. Next, we're going to remove this rear timing belt cover on the passenger side. This is held in by 1, 2, and 3 10mm bolts. There's 3. There comes this. And there it comes. And then on the driver's side, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's a 5th one here, which is for our dipstick tube, and that also has to come out. So actually, we're going to remove this first. There we go. All right, guys, so next we're going to twist off our crank bolt. And you guessed it, we're going to use some good old torque. There we go. So here's our bolt and our crankshaft gear. So here's a close look at our crankshaft gear, and this can only go back on there in one way, and that's if you line up this notch with the space that's on the crankshaft itself. And before we forget, we're also going to remove this rocker arm that's for our tensioner and tensioning roller assembly. Not going to replace this, just going to take it out and clean it up, make sure it can move freely and smoothly. So we're just going to take these washers off, sand them down, smooth them out, make sure this can operate freely. Next, we'll remove our water pump. There should be a total of 9 bolts holding this in, and these are all 10mm again. Again, have your catch pan ready. So in order to get to the last water pump bolt, which is underneath the power steering pump, we need to loosen I think these two bolts on the side of the power steering pump, then we can push this up and gain access to that last bolt and then remove our water pump. And these are going to require a 6mm Hicks bed socket. And there's actually a third one that needs to get from up top, as you can see right down there. If you got a magnet, this would be the time to use it. Now we can lift this up and get to the last water pump bolt and remove it. And here's our water pump. So here's a close look at our water pump, and this is the bolt that's hiding underneath our power steering pump. By the way, here's our gasket, and it's coming out as one piece, which means we're not gonna have a really hard time cleaning the surface. All right, next, in order to remove this housing for our thermostat, which goes here, we're gonna remove these two coolant hoses. And I'm glad to see these are not that brittle or dry, so I get to reuse these without worrying much about leaks. All right, next, there's two 10mm bolts up here that we'll remove. And surprisingly, it looks like these are the only two bolts that are holding this in. You would imagine there'd be more than two bolts for this large housing, but I guess not. There we go. And here's our thermostat. Alrighty, so here's a closer look with everything removed. So again, this is where our thermostat goes. This is where our water pump goes, and that's the surface that you see that we need to clean before we put in our new water pump. Here's a look at our crankshaft seal, our camshaft seal on the driver's side, and another camshaft seal on the passenger side. Now, the original plan was to replace the timing belt and all the timing belt components down here, plus the crankshaft seal and the camshaft seals up front. And that was because I could see evidence of leaks up front, but I couldn't see much in the rear. But most of the leaks on this side is actually coming from underneath this camshaft chain tensioner gasket that goes right between the top of the cylinder head and this housing. There's also a half moon seal that goes right in there, which is a common cause of leaks on these cars. Now on the passenger side, that camshaft chain tensioner and its gasket and seal are actually on the other side of the cylinder head. Now I wasn't going to bother with those, but it looks like I probably should, since replacing those is a lot easier with the timing belt removed. So now I'm going to have to go and get those parts, so we'll save that procedure for a separate video. But here's an answer to a question that you're probably asking, which is, how do you know where the hell everything goes when it's time to put things back? Well, it's simple. When you remove things, you put them in an order. So those are the first things we removed, and all the way down here you can see or look at the last things we removed, which is our thermostat housing. Then it was the water pump, crankshaft bolt and crankshaft gear, the coolant hose, I think that's the driver's side rear timing belt cover, passenger side camshaft gears, tensioner, so on and so forth. This is not going to be 100%, so you're still going to need to work back some from memory, but most of it you can kind of figure out by just looking at the items you're about to put back on the car. I know this is getting pretty deep pretty quick, but yeah, that's how project cars usually work. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'll probably end up swapping the cylinder heads on this, you know, maybe even rebuilding the bottom end at some point in the future, and spending a lot more money than I probably should. So if you want to see that happen, I suggest you subscribe and follow my channel, but more importantly, check out these other related videos, of which I put links to on this side of the screen for you to check out. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.